So tonight we are here to honor the goddamn fool. Plus there's a book. But seriously. So about a year and a half ago, LB came to me, my dear friend LB came to me, and said he'd been working on a novel, and he was a little ways into it, but not a lot, several chapters, a couple of months worth, I think. And he asked me to, and it's a very bold move. I don't know how many writers there are in the audience, but if you've done anything like this, you understand, I think, how bold this is, to come with a work in progress and hand it over and say, tell me what you think, let me know if I'm onto something, let me know if this is something I should really sink my teeth into and make into a finished work. And so I took it, I read it, and wow, it was so bold, so creative, so different, so original, every bit as fearless as the man who created it, that I was moved, and of course I came back to say, absolutely, this is something you do need to finish, you absolutely need to finish it. And it was at that moment, and this is a true story, I decided to start my second novel. And you know, I finished my first novel like years before and just kind of stopped writing. I was just not inspired at all. But I read this thing and I had to write. I had to start writing again. And so let me explain that dynamic and what that feels like. So sometimes you pick up a book, it might, maybe a classic or something you should read, something by someone who is well-renowned and very, very smart, and the work is very dense, and you plow into it, and it makes you, you learn from it, but you sometimes feel really stupid reading something like that. But I think it's my belief that the really smart ones, the really talented ones, make you feel smarter. They bring you along for the ride. And I know one of LB's heroes is David Foster Wallace, and I think he's kind of almost the quintessential example of this kind of writing where, obviously his IQ is just crazy off the charts, but reading his work makes you feel smarter. It brings you along for the ride, and it never talks down to you. It's like it makes you feel like a better person, and that's exactly how I felt reading this book. It made me need to write again. It made me feel smart. It was so innovative and so weird and cool that I couldn't help it. I was like, okay, I don't know what to do with my writing, but I've got to write. And so tonight, we're going to hear from the man himself when I'm done rambling. But you're going to hear a bit of it. But I really, really beg you, please pick up a copy, have him sign it, take it home, and then every one of you will have a novel in 2 years or so, because it's that inspiring. And I think that's the mark of true intelligence, is when it brings you into the conversation in a way that you feel like you're not being talked down to, you're being inspired, you're being energized, and that's really something. So this is really special. So thanks for coming, and here is Mr. Deyo.
Wow. Lance Stieber-Myers, ladies and gentlemen. That was quite an introduction. And if you're wondering if I'm going to live up to it, the answer is no, I'm not. So let's just get that out of the way. Actually, I'll tell you a little follow-up to the story. So I had given the book to Lance, as he said, and I said, let me know if this is worth doing. And if it's not, then I will abandon it if it's not any good. So he told me to keep writing, and I wrote the rest, and I gave it to him, and I said, what do you think of it now? And he said, it's intense. And he told me that the rest was not as good. And I totally trust this man, and I completely threw out the rest, and I rewrote it all. So the result is, he was right. He was right, so thank you, Lance. Yes, Buzz?
Did you get his approval on the new second half?
Oh, he hasn't seen the record. No way I'm ever letting him see it. All right, the only things you need to know to understand this chapter I'm about to read is, well, the setting is a imaginary boarding school in a real town called Newburyport, Massachusetts. Interesting town, founded in the early 1600s, was a, thank you, Buzz. Buzz Moran. It was founded in the early 1600s. It was a pirate and smuggling town at first, then it became a hotbed of abolitionism. William Lloyd Garrison himself, one of the most prominent abolitionists in this country's history, was born here in Newburyport, was the founder of the Liberator newspaper there, and now in my story, he's the namesake for the imaginary high school, boarding school there. The other thing you need to know is that Dr. Harriman, the Latin teacher there, is just a Latin teacher, but he has just been told that because the school is cutting back on its budget, they are making him also take on the role of basketball coach. Chapter 3, The Gift of a Whistle. It begins with a quote. I hate all sports as rabidly as a person who likes sports hates common sense. H.L. Mencken. And so it was. Dr. Harriman had expended what political capital 30 years of loyal service had won him, and still failed to evade this coaching assignment. He'd been thwarted by 3 damn punks. It was early October, near the start of basketball season, and it was time for the first practice of the Garrison Liberators. A bleary Dr. Harriman stood before his team, they being Lefty, Jackie, and Zero, who were like brothers, and Kosoko and Mazzy, who were brothers. Dr. Harriman, who owned neither a tattered gray sweatshirt nor a baseball cap, wore his accustomed tweed and bow tie. Coach Harriman, Jackie called out, raising his hand. Coach Harriman. The surreality of it echoed through the filibuster gym. Coach, we got you something. Jackie rose from his folding chair and approached Dr. Harriman. Well, it's a whistle. Dr. Harriman, who was not drunk, winced through his white beard. Thank you, Mr. Polish, he said, accepting the whistle and looping its chain over his head. I shall treasure it. Jackie sat down in his folding chair again. It squeaked through the gymnasium. The exertion of bringing the whistle chain over his beard now triggered in Dr. Harriman a fit of coughing. It was a long few moments in passing, and Zero had almost risen to help the old man when it stopped. Gentlemen, said Dr. Harriman, who had a booming bass voice when he spoke up, if my standing here before you as coach of the Garrison basketball team seems to any of you to be a farce, he began to cough again, but brought it under control. A grotesque, buffoonish, goddamn farce, then you have better judgment than I gave you credit for. Kosoko and Mazzy didn't snicker, or even stifle a snicker, but the amusement was so evident in their eyes that it spread to Zero, who couldn't resist laughing once, loudly. The man you see before you, Harriman went on, was at one time as arrogant and entitled as any among you. That arrogance, that hope, that pleasure in life has been ground away. Oh yes, my boys. Ground to powder by 3 fucking marriages, a war, the insolence of my students, the contempt of the faculty, and the goddamn and blasted rise of politics in the academy. He somehow managed to bend over and pick up a basketball from the wooden gym floor. He unconsciously rested the ball on his more than generous midriff as he spoke. I hold now in my ancient hands the token of my last decline. This leathern ball. For a moment, the old man seemed unable to go on, but he found his courage. This goddamn bag of air, this Wilson, is the last nail. There were tears on his florid cheeks. And you must never think, you goddamn brats, you must never think it could escape my notice that it is you who have swung the hammer. The boys looked at one another with an innocence that was perfectly genuine. Dr. Harriman had been an unlikely choice for the basketball coach. Unlikely in the extreme, but none of them had realized he was there against his will, that the job had been forced upon him by a parsimonious administration. As if to confirm this suspicion, Harriman said, "Your headmaster, Ms. De Bono, for reasons too asinine to list, has placed her trust and the trust of this institution in me. And though she did it as an insult, infallibly so, sure as I'm a man, a black, cunning, cruel disgrace, in spite of this, and it is a miserable fucking damned contemptible disgrace, a disgrace, I nevertheless gratefully accept the charge as sacred. Aggracit edundo. The charge of your health, and I suppose your prospects for victory in the contests ahead. This charge I take up willingly and without complaint. Now then." He bounced the ball once and tried to bounce it again, but on the second try it struck the toe of his shoe and caromed into the locker room. "Yes, now, who of you has ever played basketball?" Lefty raised his hand halfway. This was fitting because he had only halfway played. And as he considered it now, he realized he hadn't, in any strict sense, played at all. He lowered his hand. He and Jackie and Zero, no less than Harriman himself, were startled to see that neither Kosoko nor Mazzy had his hand up either. "What, none of you?" Harriman implored. "But surely the traditions of, that is to say, the American, well, one of you must have had at least a hoop in his driveway." Kosoko spoke up. "Coach Mazzy and me had a hoop. We played some, but mostly not much. We figured we're just too little to hoop. Mostly we play soccer and swim." Harriman looked green. "But you know the rules, I'm sure. You're familiar with the conventions. That is, you played the game, for God's sake." "Coach," said Mazzy, the youngest of the boys, "haven't you ever played basketball?" 10 minutes later, our lads were wringing wet, clutching at their chests, choking on their own CO2. They were hobbling around an elevated track mounted along the wall, 1 story up from the gym floor. The disrepair into which the track, indeed the entire gym, had fallen spoke of the Garrison Academy's famous emphasis on academics. There was old dust on the handrails of the track, as Jackie learned by grabbing them for support. Kosoko and Mazzy were bringing up the front, but even they were by now cursing their parentage. Mazzy almost stepped on Zero, who lay facing the wall, motionless but for the sobs racking his frame. "Pathetic," growled Harriman, sealing the cap of his flask. He then blew, for the first time, into his whistle with the full capacity of his fat-bound lungs. "Hit the goddamn deck and commence pushing up." "How many push-ups?" said Kosoko. "Well," said Harriman, "let us say 200. Kosoko, the strongest of the team by far, managed 8 push-ups. Lefty hit the record for his gang with 4. Zero still lay whimpering against the wall. Harriman, blowing another weak, shrill alarm, found he was beginning to savor this whistle. "Avast pushing up," he hollered. "We shall now begin with your training. Follow me below." He led the shattered youths downstairs to the court. "Now then," he thrust the basketball, which he'd retrieved from the locker room, into the chest of young Jackie. "Let us see who among you is the best hand at tossing the ball through the ring." It would have given the boys tremendous satisfaction, irresistible satisfaction, to inform their coach that the term of art was shooting, not fucking tossing the ball through the ring. And that what was more, this bombard, Dr. Harriman, was a fat, ludicrous, ignorant drunk and a bastard of a fool. And they would have told him so too if they'd had the wind. Instead, they formed a line at the top of the key and began shooting free throws. In all fairness, Harriman had not been far wrong in his choice of words after all. The boys were, more or less, tossing the ball, though not through any ring. An 8th grade girl had been out on the football field watching the entire time through the window, smoking cigarettes and laughing herself sick. Now the practice was over, and the team filed out through the gym's double doors into the warm Massachusetts night. They were dead on their feet, whipped as any cur, but they held up their heads. It had been brutal, but they'd made it through. "Hey," said the 8th grade girl. Zero looked up with a half smile. "Yeah?" "You suck," said the girl. The girl was Bertie Love of the Wildlands, one of only a few dozen black residents of Newburyport, Massachusetts. She was a townie just like Zero, and she just matriculated at Garrison. She loved cigarettes, kissing boys, history, and a great deal else, but she hated as strongly as she loved. Thank you so much. I guess that's it, unless maybe someone has questions.
Why Newburyport?
Why Newburyport? That's a good question. When I started thinking about where I wanted to set the book, I thought of a trip I had once taken to Newport, Rhode Island. And I guess I Googled it, and then somehow saw Newburyport in the results and started reading about Newburyport. And I was like, Newburyport, this is fascinating. Garrison was from there, you know, this abolition movement was from there. That's fascinating. All these pirates and crazy stuff like that. So, yeah, what the hell? Of course, I've never been there. Never been anywhere near there. No, only what I could find online. But there it is. So we'll see if people from Newburyport have anything to say about it. Yes.
Have you ever played basketball?
Have I ever played basketball?
Yeah.
I have played basketball.
Oh, okay.
I like to play basketball.
I have a question.
Yes.
Well, we had lunch a few months ago, and you were describing a novel that involved like some sort of a science fiction apocalyptic scenario. This doesn't appear to be that book unless there's some aspect of it that really changes later on.
There is.
Ah, I see.
In book 2. Book 2 of 3.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it gets a lot more fantastical as the story goes
This
on.
particular one gets more fantastic.
This is the same one, yep.
Okay.
This is
Just
it.
checking, because that was very realistic.
Yes, well, thank you. All right, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your coming out.